Okay, now it's on. Now I can hear it. Okay, did everybody have coffee? Sue? Sue? Kevin? Order! Order! All right, everybody. All right, everybody. You know, we're running a little behind schedule. So, as a co-host, I'm going to use my prerogative to cut this next introduction short and cut your lunch by 5 minutes, and hopefully we'll get back on track, okay? So, the next panel is going to be led by John Walton. John is the Mr. Mulvey, CIO of San Mateo County. He came to us in 2012 from the city and county of San Francisco. He began his career in computer technology working on international engineering projects, and following his time as a consultant, he was deputy CIO for the city of San Jose, a senior manager for Unisys, and the CIO, as I said, for the city of San Francisco. And actually, long before John came to the county of San Mateo, I followed him on Twitter and all of that because he was doing some really innovative and cool things in the city of San Francisco. And so when the county manager told us that John was coming to San Mateo County, on a personal level and professional level and a technology level, I was thrilled. And he's been here now a couple years and he hasn't let us down, and we're really doing some exciting things. So I'm going to cut your introduction a little short, not read all this bio, but let me give you John Walton.
Well, thanks everybody for coming today. It's a real pleasure to be back for the second Connect event, Connect 14. I hope we do these every year. I was really pleased to be part of the group that was able to plan the event this year and participated last year as well. It's always an honor to be part of the event and invited by Supervisor Slocum and Assemblymember Mullen to this. If I could invite my panel to come up and have them get comfortable and seated. I'm really privileged to have these folks on my panel today. They're real leaders in their areas, and I think they have some really interesting information to share. As an introduction, what I'll say is, and then I'll let them actually introduce themselves, because I couldn't do them justice probably in their experience and in their knowledge of what they're doing today. But just as a context, when I was talking to the group about what we wanted to be on the agenda, one of the things that struck me is last year we talked about tools and policies and things like that, and this year there's a lot of that as well, about what tools you want to use and how you do it and why it's important. But one of the things that's near and dear to my heart is just connecting people in general. You know, there's a lot of different challenges as we go forward as a government about putting services online and connecting more and communicating more with our communities. But we forget sometimes there's, for us that are connected, we all have unlimited data plans and broadband at home, there's a large segment of our community that don't have those same privileges or opportunities to be connected in the same way that a lot of us are. So how many of you, I'm sure, came in, the first thing you did was like, okay, where's the Wi-Fi hotspot? I'm going to connect to it. And because, you know, I'm on a data plan, I'm trying to tweet this picture and it says, oh, it's a big picture. Do you really want to do it now, or do you want to wait till you're on Wi-Fi? Well, of course I want to be on Wi-Fi. You know, this is Facebook. They must have Wi-Fi here. So we're all like looking around for the Wi-Fi. So, okay, there it is. And okay, I'll look in my binder. Here's the password, right? And so the first thing you did, if you're like me and you know your kids are using up all your bandwidth at home on YouTube videos and Netflix, is you're looking for the Wi-Fi hotspot because you know you got to manage your data plan, right? So part of our thing we want to talk about today is how do we connect the community. Certainly there's, you know, we're in the Silicon Valley and a lot of us are connected. And a lot of you are connected. You probably don't worry about these things. But a lot of the community we're trying to connect to don't have those same opportunities that we do, either at home or they have to really manage their cell phone plans or data plans. And so just getting them connected to the things we're talking about is often a real challenge, and we don't want to leave them behind because we think there are real benefits. Now, I have a clicker up here somewhere. I should have paid more attention to where it is. Yeah, okay, so I just want to bring up a picture, and I'll just do this real quick because I really want to spend more time on my panel. So in San Mateo County, like Warren said, one of the things we really wanted to talk about when I joined the county, and Mr. Malpe's been very supportive of this and the board, is how do we connect the community? So one of the challenges we had in the county is really typical government project, very boring. We have to rebuild the whole network. Yes, it's important. Yes, we need to do it. But what does it mean to the community? Not a lot. So we carved out a piece of our focus to say, okay, in addition to rebuilding the network for the county staff and for county services, how do we connect the community better at the same time? So this is just a real quick picture. We kicked off a pilot project last year and starting to connect communities that were not well connected. So we had a little town called Pescadero, those of you that have been out to the coast. Pretty much can't even get cell phone coverage out there. So we said, well, let's look at that community. We came up with some ideas of what we were trying to accomplish: better connectivity for the underserved, educational access, economic enhancements, and access to the services we were putting online. And we were so successful with those pilots that now we have a list of over 18 sites we're going to do this coming year around parks, city facilities. Then we have a list of, and a growing list, I should say, of almost 50 other sites that we want to do. And why is that important? We'll get into that in a minute, but before I talk anymore, if I could start with Mr. Mora and have my panel introduce themselves and maybe take a few minutes just to talk about their background and their interest in this, and then we can get more into the interactive side of the conversation.
Okay, thank you, John. Brian Mora. I'm a consultant these days for Regional Government Services. But prior to that, I know many of the folks in the room here. I worked for the city of San Carlos for a number of years. And prior to that, I also worked at the city of Hayward and the city and county of San Francisco, like John, a little earlier, I'm sure, than John was there. And I also spent some time in Contra Costa County. These days, I'm working with a number of agencies. Last year, worked with the city of Walnut Creek on some of their budget and financial challenges. And these days, I'm working in Portola Valley with Nick and Sharon on some technology issues. I also wanted to mention a project that's very relevant to this group. I worked with the Institute for Local Government earlier this year on a project to develop an online engagement guide, and that's available on their website for free. If you go to ca.ilg.org, you can download it. And it was funded by the Irvine Foundation, and it was a project to help cities and counties across the state do more with limited resources using technology for online outreach. But while I was in San Carlos, I also worked on the Wireless Silicon Valley project and was involved in setting up the free Wi-Fi in downtown San Carlos and also at the San Carlos Caltrain station. So certainly a lot of past and present projects that I've done that are very related to this area. So look forward to the discussion.
Is this on? Good morning. My name is Anne Marie Despain, and I'm the Library Director for the San Mateo County Library Joint Powers Authority. That's a mouthful, but essentially the county library was established in 1912, and the JPA, the Library JPA, was formed in 1999. So we serve our 11 member cities and then also the unincorporated areas of the county. We have 12 community libraries, a bookmobile, our what we call our e-branch, our virtual library, and library service is changing, and we're evolving constantly, providing new services, new collections, new programs, but we also still stay true to those traditional values of being a democratic institution of learning and equal access. When we talk about the digital divide plays out every day in our community libraries, and we see it in all of our libraries. We serve, the San Mateo County Library serves both the most affluent residents in this county, and we also serve the least. In some of our communities, about 26% are living below the poverty line. So it's very relevant. I've been in libraries for over 20 years. I've been with San Mateo County for about 15 and director for the last 5. I was a library assistant working in an urban city library when the internet was new and before the World Wide Web came along, and conducted classes at that point. And so the evolution has just been, even in the last 5 years, but over the last couple decades, it's been amazing. I also feel like I need to give a shout out to my yellow lab, Molly. So, since it's a dog, I usually talk about my 4-year-old child who is trying to take over all of the media devices in our house, but I'll give a shout out to the dog today. So.
Hi, I'm Ann Campbell, the San Mateo County Superintendent of Schools, and my role is to, according to the Ed Code, superintend the schools in my county, which is a rather daunting prospect. In San Mateo County, we have 23 school districts, 174 schools, and that 174 schools includes 14 charter schools who operate independently from one another and from the traditional school districts. We have close to 94,000 kids in San Mateo County enrolled in TK to 12th grade, and probably about 4,800 or so teachers who are working in classrooms every day with our kids. On a personal note, I'm a member of a family of 4. I have 2 high schoolers, and my partner is a kindergarten teacher. So I kind of see the K-12 spectrum from both ends. And if you were at my house last night, you would see our 2 high schoolers, one in the den and one in the kitchen area. The one in the kitchen had 3 different devices going simultaneously, chatting with friends, doing some research on a particular project for her social studies class while also taking notes on her laptop. In the den would have been the senior who was working on an IB art project, who is chatting with her friends with a particular digital art project that she'd done, and she was trying to get their feedback so that she could get it ready to go for today in school. The kindergarten teacher at dinner last night mentions, gee, I had the best day in kindergarten today, but you know, I was trying to teach my kids the proper pencil grip, and a kid said to me, is there an app for that? And then later on in the morning, we were learning about whales, and I was asking them what the different kinds of whales are, and one child said, well, if you would just go on Google, you can find out. So when you think about those as the clients of our school system, as I think about connectivity, we have lots and lots of issues in schools that I know that we will get into as the panel goes on. But it's great to be here today. I want to say a special thank you to Assemblymember Mullen and Supervisor Slocum for pulling us together for a very, very stimulating and energetic day. So thank you.
Thanks, Ann. So hang on to that microphone for a minute. So I was reading an article in the Wall Street Journal, and it was talking about how underprivileged families, right? Families that don't have the luxuries you and I have. My kids are the same way, right? My 10-year-old's in there playing Minecraft when he probably should be doing his homework in the kitchen. And, you know, my 5-year-old's in there on the iPad watching Netflix, right? But I was reading this article about how, you know, McDonald's has 17,000 Wi-Fi sites around the nation in their restaurants. And, you know, Starbucks has 7,000 sites. And for them, it's an economic driver. But the interesting thing in this article was how the underprivileged families or the underserved families in all these communities all around the U.S. are going to these places now because their kids need to do homework, right? So they park outside of them at night in their cars, or they go inside and they do their homework. They go to libraries as well, and we'll get to you in a minute, Anne-Marie. But can you just talk about, I know you're doing a lot in schools, right? I see the news and the Obama administration talking about the new initiative to get schools more wired. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that, how the federal things are rolling down and your vision for San Mateo County schools, but then also just your personal views of philosophy. How important is it for youth at whatever age to be connected? Does it really make that much of a difference in their life? Because a lot of people view it as a luxury, right? They think kids are just going to be connected to play games or to chat and things like that. And those are all important. Those are great social interaction forums, but is there really an impact to children if they're connected or not?
I think there's a tremendous impact, yes. And there's a huge digital divide in San Mateo County, which is very ironic when you think that we were described earlier this morning by Nikki as the epicenter of development in technology. We have many, many families in our community who qualify for the free and reduced lunch program, which means they're living in different levels of need. Many of those families do not have access, or if they do, it's one smartphone for the entire family. And you may have a family with 2 parents and 5 kids and that one smartphone. And there certainly are libraries and various other schools, various other places that kids can go to use various devices that they may not have at home and gain the connectivity and the access to work on their schoolwork. But those close. Or perhaps I'm the oldest child in the family and I need to be helping out with my siblings, so I can't get to the library or I can't get to Starbucks before it closes. So they're trying to use smartphones, that one smartphone in the family, to do their homework with. And my kids happen to be at Sequoia High School. I was listening to a teacher talk about a student there who had needed to submit quite a lengthy essay, and the only way that she had been able to do it was on her dad's smartphone, and to type the entire essay in. You can imagine doing that. But that shows that here we are. I live in my household, and I think we probably have 14 different devices right now that connect to the internet, and yet there are many, many places in our county where kids don't have that access. And if you think about all the amazing things that we've heard about this morning, that is the way you live in today's world, and that you are going to be successful as you move into adulthood. So as a young person, and I would argue as a child moving on into adolescence, you absolutely need that access. And so together as a community, schools can help with that. We have Comcast that's working on making sure that kids whose families qualify for free and reduced lunch for $9.95 a month can get access to the internet, and they can also purchase a very reasonably priced laptop computer to go along with that well. But there's a huge gap. So there's a way for all of us, whether we're in the world of education or government, the nonprofit or the private sector, to really engage at the local level in our communities and say, how do we absolutely make sure that everybody in our community is connected?
Thanks. No, that's great. And Anne-Marie, can you go back and talk a little bit more then about your vision for the library? I mean, libraries have changed so much since I was a kid. I used to go to libraries and there were a stack of books and card catalogs. I know I'm dating myself. I mean, now you've really transformed what a library is all about. But you're in competition, right? You're in competition with Starbucks. You're an information center now, but you're either in competition or in partnership with, right? With the schools, with these other places people go. You've become an epicenter for so many different things other than just the traditional book. Can you talk more about your vision and where you see it going in the future? What do you see the role of libraries being as learning centers or communication hubs in the future?
Sure. The library card catalog is gone.
I know.
People now use them as furniture in their house. It's like a retro piece, right? But libraries, I mean, in some ways, the traditions still hold. It's about information and access for all. And I want to talk a little bit about what we see with the digital divide in libraries. But they are really busy, bustling community hubs, and they are the community center. So what's unique about libraries is we serve every community member, all ages, all communities, and we really serve as a community connection to bring people together. And so that's very exciting. What we see is that there is a digital divide, and there's two components that we see to that. It's people who don't have the equipment, the computers or the broadband, the internet access at home, and then we see a lot of people that don't have the skills as well. So they are being left out of all of those information and resources that are being put online, and then additionally they're disconnected and they're not being involved in some of the community and the civic and the neighborhood discussions that are happening as well. So we just did a public survey. Books still rank number one. That's what our communities want us to have. Books are not going away. They may be in a different format in the future, but certainly that's number one. But the internet and Wi-Fi is also, that ranks second. So we do see ourselves as community learning centers. During the summer, we offered summer enrichment camps for kids where they don't have that privilege of going away to a camp in the summer, and we're very concerned about summer learning loss. We also see ourselves as creative hubs. Lots of libraries are implementing maker spaces and digital labs, and it really, libraries do provide a lot for everyone, and we're continuing that as we are having discussions with some of our communities about building new libraries. They want spaces for kids, multi-purpose rooms so they can do activities and, inspirational and teen spaces and quiet spaces. I mean, libraries are not quiet any longer, so we're actually zoning for quiet because your library is not a quiet spot, and so we actually need to zone for that or create quiet rooms. So the paradigm is completely shifted. One thought that I have or vision is, I listen to a radio show about, we hear in college dorm rooms, the startups are being created, garages, there's an homage to the garages. I really see libraries, the makerspace in a library, that's where the next startups, hopefully for any child in our community, can create and imagine and, lead us to the future. So those are some of my thoughts.
Great, thanks. So Brian, back to you then, and then I want to, after we get done talking with Brian, I want to get the audience to participate more, because I really want to see what your ideas on how we try to solve this problem or support these folks in their efforts. But Brian, I've been around government probably about the same time you have. I mean, public Wi-Fi has gone through sort of these ebbs and flows of interest, right? And we've seen the trends. You have these big announcements. We're going to cover an entire city with Wi-Fi, right? We've seen some of the big cities try that. Most of them didn't succeed. There wasn't the economic model to really do sort of the grand vision for this ubiquitous public Wi-Fi for an entire large geographic area. And so the backlash to that I saw was some people started to perceive it, the public or administration, as well. It's just a nice to have. It's sort of a cool techie toy or thing to have, but it's an afterthought after the thing. So how, in your mind, when you've seen, and I know you've probably seen a lot of them succeed and a lot of them fail, what's the differentiator? How do organizations add value? If you're a public organization or any type of, or if you're a library or a school or a Starbucks or McDonald's, we're all in this together. We all have different reasons for providing it, right? But the public benefits in all those cases. But how do we demonstrate that benefit so it's not seen as just a nice to have, but as important as, water or roads or anything else?
Yeah, it's been interesting over the years watching these things change. When I was working in San Carlos, I was also chairing the countywide telecommunications authority known as SAMCAT. And interestingly, when, as John alludes to, the initial interest, or some might say craze about public Wi-Fi came about, cities in this county actually were approached by companies requesting to be allowed to put in free Wi-Fi. And so we did a request for proposal. We later teamed up with Joint Venture Silicon Valley and created what was then called Wireless Silicon Valley. And that's how we came to end up with the famous pilot or test network that continues to this day in San Carlos. So if you're in downtown San Carlos, the San Carlos Caltrain station, you can get free Wi-Fi courtesy of Cisco and IBM. That network lives on. We also were able in several of the communities through the cable TV franchise with Comcast to get free hookups for schools and libraries and cities. And in fact, one of the projects that I worked on there is not only with San Carlos, but also with the county and Belmont and Foster City, a number of the cities. We had one of the last cable TV franchises in the state before the law changed. And that's significant because back in the days when cities and counties wrote their own franchises, they could require connectivity to the schools and the libraries. When the law changed, that went away. In fact, I was very involved in the negotiations around that legislation, and it was fascinating to hear legislators in Sacramento where we said, you realize, of course, if you change the law, the libraries and the schools don't get free hookups anymore. And they were like, yeah, we know that. It wasn't a big deal to them. But for those of us on the local level, it is a big deal. I was relating to the panel last week that as long ago as 1990, which is 20 plus years ago, we had a city school process called 2+2, which I believe exists to this day, where 2 school board members and 2 council members in San Carlos would meet every other month and talk about common issues. And in 1990, the school superintendent, a guy named Don Shalvey, who many of you probably know, came forward with this technology survey they did every other year. And what he said was that in San Carlos, 2/3 of the families that have kids in school also have connectivity to the internet and have computers at home, which blew my mind at the time. I was shocked. had no idea it was that high. And as those surveys continued to roll out, 5 years later, we were told the number was 3/4. And that drove a lot of the work that we did with the school district in terms of getting them on the internet, getting them enrolled as one of the beta sites for Net Day, the city's involvement with websites, et cetera. We're one of the first cities in the world with a website, and that was one of the reasons. It wasn't so much that it was a priority at the city level, it was the data the school district provided us that we frankly didn't know about. But, you know, fast forward to the world of Wi-Fi networks, what you see today, I'm finding, is that oftentimes they go in as part of a need, typically for things like putting in wireless parking meters or smart parking. And so the city or the county, as the case may be, has a business reason to put that in. And then to the extent that it is possible to add some additional bandwidth, suddenly you can also offer that to your local businesses and to customers and make it more of an amenity. I think one of the more successful examples we've seen around the country is in Corpus Christi, Texas, where they put in a Wi-Fi network to read the utility meters, namely the water meters, and then opened it up to the community. And more, more locally in the cities of both San Jose and Santa Clara, when the vendors who were attempting to put municipal Wi-Fi together and their business model for whatever reason didn't work, those cities basically bought those networks from the vendors and then enhanced them. And that's the basis for the free Wi-Fi in downtown San Jose. And in the case of Santa Clara, as some of you know, they have their own electric utility, Silicon Valley Power. Silicon Valley Power bought out that core network and then built it out. So in some cases, failures of the private sector can be leveraged by communities to become the basis for additional broadband access. Now, when those companies went out of business, unfortunately, most cities were not in a position to buy those networks and enhance them the way that Santa Clara and San Jose were. But it does show that to the extent that you can, sometimes there are opportunities not only in terms of taking that downtown parking application or applications that the city is going to deploy anyway and help out other sectors provide additional access, but in some cases there's even an opportunity to turn a failed private sector venture into additional access. But I think John's right. There are some interesting models out there, and I think looking at them provides some ideas and maybe inspiration on how others can succeed in that area.
Great, thank you all. So I know we're running a little bit late on time. Let's open it up to the audience and see what questions you have for the panel. These folks have just a wealth of experience and knowledge, and I'd like to hear what some of your thoughts are or questions you have about where the world is going. The lady in the red jacket.
Do we have a ability to know in the whole county how our schools are connected? Are they having connection problems? Are there not enough computers? Are they not getting service? We think because we're in Silicon Valley area that all our schools are up to date with everything. I'm just curious if we actually know that.
That's a great question. Is this on? There we go. Yes, we do know. If you think about our 23 school districts, we have some school districts. I could take you on a tour of San Mateo County, and we could go to a middle school not too far away from here that's doing a one-to-one iPad project. I could take you to another school a little bit farther up, 101, that I went to last fall, where they had virtually no computers at all, and they were tremendously excited because a teacher had gone on donorschoose.com and gotten a class set of Chromebooks, brought them back to the school, and everybody was so excited, and then they realized they didn't have the internet connectivity that they needed or the infrastructure of their network to be able to use them. That same school district, when it came time this spring to give the Smarter Balanced Assessment, all of California's assessments are now going to be computer administered, didn't have what it needed in terms of infrastructure and connectivity to take those tests. So from the county office, we have hotspots that we use when we're traveling to get on the internet as we can. We gave them our hotspots to use so that they could take the test. So you have everything in between. What I would say in terms of our school districts, there are two factors that seem to be very, very associated with what their level of connectivity, the sophistication of their infrastructure, and the number of devices that they have. One is size. We have many, many school districts in our county that are probably somewhere between 350 kids and 3,000 or 4,000 students. When you have a school district that size, the smallness is nice. It allows a lot of personalization and warmth, but you don't necessarily then have the staffing structure and depth of expertise that you need. If you're in a larger school district at around 10,000, you have that level of management within your district to really be out there and be doing what you need to do for the tech level. The other issue is resources. And we have in San Mateo County, as the epicenter of technology development, some of the very wealthiest school districts in the entire state of California. Those school districts, regardless of their size, are very well resourced. They have incredible access. They've got wonderful Wi-Fi everywhere. A lot of them have one-to-one device programs for kids. And we also have many school districts in our county that are really struggling from a resource point of view where they don't have that. And I think our biggest challenge right now is to be sure that all of those 174 schools that I mentioned early on have connectivity, infrastructure, devices. And thanks to put in a plug here for the Startup Education Foundation that Mark Zuckerberg and Priscilla Chan have started. Jan Christensen is here from Redwood City, and in the Ravenswood School District, Startup Education has given each of those districts sizable grants, and I know in Redwood City they are using a portion of those funds to really upgrade their technology. There's also an initiative coming out of the County Office of Education in collaboration with the Full Circle Fund called the iZone. And we have, our goal with that is to be sure that our schools have the digital capacity that they need to really deliver personalized digital learning. And we are focusing on what we're calling digital districts, which is to be sure all of our districts have what they need. But more importantly, if you think about who our kids are today that are in school and the world that they're going to move into as adults, what they are getting in their classrooms need to prepare them for that world. And so we need to really look at instruction. And we're looking at something that you may have heard called personalized learning, which is really kids taking more ownership of their learning. It's not as teacher directed. The teacher goes from being a teacher center stage kind of a person to more of a guide and a facilitator. That allows kids too, if they are trying to show that they understand a concept, to tell a story through Instagram pictures rather than writing that typical 5-paragraph essay, because that's what their world is like today and will be like tomorrow. So there's a huge amount of work to do there as well.
Thanks. That's great. Yeah, and I hope, being in the Silicon Valley, I do hope that people continue to support the school districts and the work they're doing. There's great benefactors in this area and companies, I think, and people that are interested in seeing, benefit to all. And I know there's real disparity in the county, but I know they can follow up with you if they want to get more involved and, supporting the school's efforts to get people more connected and more devices and training as well for the kids, on how to use the devices. Other questions? The gentleman with the the green thing around his neck. I'll narrow it down.
Hello, my name's Rafael Avendaño. I'm the director of the Siena Youth Center, as well as a council member of the North Forks Community Council. The question I have is if you could speak a little bit more on the launch for the free and reduced lunch internet price for students, as well as having some ideas how kids can get connected, because that's a major concern that we always deal with as an educator, is how do we support more kids to get online, especially being that everything is ran through Gmail now and their Gmail accounts, but some kids can't really access that other than at our center or somewhere else, or like a library.
So one of the initiatives that we're working on right now through the County Office of Education is exactly that. How do we help families who don't have and kids who don't have access, who may be on the free and reduced lunch program, to the internet? And there's a wonderful, wonderful organization, the Chicano Latino Foundation, there I go, that we have just had a couple of exploratory meetings with. They have worked very, very hard to be sure that the children who are not connected and their families get access to the internet. So Comcast has this wonderful $9.95 a month program for connecting through Comcast, but it tends to be difficult to work your way through it as a family to get to where you need to be. And so what the Chicano Latina Foundation has done is to really go into communities and go door to door, quite frankly, and to hold meetings and sessions at schools to really help walk parents through, help them understand the importance of why kids do need to have access to that Gmail account and to the internet to do their homework. Get them set up, get them with a device, and then more importantly, the parents need to participate in all of this as well. And often they don't necessarily have the digital skills that they need. So the foundation runs classes at local schools for families and kids together. So you're really working on parental and family engagement as well as getting kids online. And that's something that Brian Simmons, who I saw here somewhere from, who's working on the iZone in our office, and I are beginning to really work with the Chicano Latino Foundation to say, how do we really penetrate San Mateo County? How can we go out into our districts and really help you do that very, very important work that you're doing? Because it is absolutely vital. We all take it for granted, and there are many kids in our county who don't have it.
I just wanted to add that as far as we're working on a couple projects throughout the county, public libraries currently offer about 1,600 public computers, and then we all offer Wi-Fi as well, and we see about 700 sessions a day of Wi-Fi. We do have some homework centers that obviously are set up with PCs, but one project that we're excited about that Supervisor Slocum has brought to our attention that we're moving forward on is in early 2015, we're looking at starting a mobile hotspot lending program. And so we would circulate the devices. We will target certain communities and programs like our Quest Homework Center in East Palo Alto. But we'll also have some devices just to see how it works with the general public, and we will combine these with, letting someone check out the internet is one thing, but maybe they don't have a computer, so we'll also start lending laptops and other devices with those as well. So we're excited about that, and the Library JPA Governing Board just approved that to move forward.
That's great. I think those are great ideas. And it's always been a dream of mine that, you could go into a library or a school and take things home with you, right? Because I think the donation programs are great, but I think if it was more of just a shared economy where people could just have the hotspots or tablets or laptops they needed and take them as they needed them and share them in a larger group, sometimes I think that's as effective, if not more effective, than the individual ownership approach to things.
Yeah, I mean, even though we are offering a lot of computers and adding them, the need is still there. I mean, we see people still lining up to use a computer in many of our libraries. We still have time limits, 2 hours a day, which is not enough time if you're working on a research project or searching for a job or filling out a complicated social service application. So if you drive by a library in the morning or the evening, you'll often see people in the parking lot or sitting on a bench, and that's so they can access the Wi-Fi that bleeds out of the building. So, yeah, the need's still there.
That's great. Other questions for the panel? I think we have, I'm reading a timer in the back. I was told we didn't have a timer. Is this the right time? Just so I can, okay, perfect. Okay, we have 10 minutes left. More questions from the audience?
John, Michael Barber with Supervisor Pine's office, also a member of Burlington School Board. The issue, I heard a lot about seeking grant funds for computers and so forth. Even relatively wealthy school districts have a problem with that the cost of technology is quite high, and the moment you buy a device, it's out of date. So how are we addressing that on an ongoing basis, particularly given we've moved into the smarter balanced testing process with a common core, so having digital connections is fundamental to education today. So how are we building capacity to manage that, whether you're in a wealthy district or not a wealthy district? Technology is changing, and it's really expensive for school districts to manage that. And actually, on that note, one follow-up question is the social media part. How are school districts managing that social media and the communications side. So there's also a communications element to technology. Thank you.
You're getting all the questions today, Ann.
Thank you, Michael. As far as acquisition of devices and staying on the cutting edge of what's out there, that's tremendously hard for schools to do. Schools have been so under-resourced, even our better resourced school districts for so long, there's a lot of catch-up, quite frankly, that needs to happen. And once you make that investment, you don't necessarily have those dollars recurring so that you can continue to do it. So you have to think very carefully about what will get you the most bang for your buck and will help you stay the most relevant for the longest period of time. And I do know that various school districts have chosen to, rather than actually outright buying equipment, to lease it, because then they can refresh it on a every 2 or 3 year basis. But it's a huge issue for kids and for teachers. And for those of us who are superintendents and principals and in purchasing roles, it's also a gigantic issue, because you really want to be as adept as you can and as nimble as you can and be able to stay up with what's going on. And yet you do have very definite finite resources that you're dealing with. With social media, I actually asked that question at our dinner table last night, because I don't know a whole lot about what's going on with social media in schools right now. And I said to Emma, who's our sophomore, so do you get to use your smartphone in class at school? And she kind of rolled her eyes and looked at me and said, no. And then she's paused and she said, well, I can use it in 7th period. And I said, oh, well, what's 7th period? Well, that's social studies. And it's the end of the day, and the teacher thinks we're a little bored, so she thinks that this will liven up the class. And actually it does, because they can immediately go out and get all of this information that they're talking about, the Russian Revolution right now, and have all kinds of ways to access additional information about it. But I think when you're in the traditional school day, there's not a lot of access to social media, quite frankly, in classrooms. And I was thinking, as I was watching the Instagram presentation earlier this morning, the biggest challenge we probably have in schools right now is, as we think about our teaching force, how do we help them really learn where kids are today, what the different technological developments are, how do they stay on top of them, and how do they begin to really weave and integrate those into their classrooms. And I think we oftentimes don't make as good a use of our kids as we should, because they're really out there on the cutting edge. They know what's there, and we need to really involve them in helping us bring social media into school in ways that are positive and constructive, because that's obviously, from a kid point of view, a tremendous hook and a very powerful way for us to help them learn as well.
I want to take another question, but just one commentary on that, since I do have 2 children in school. I mean, it's great to hear your vision for the school districts in San Mateo County. I think one of the challenges I see as a parent is, I think that traditional view that we have in government and libraries and school times, to me, the kids already have a lot of the devices. You talk about the expense of it. The irony I find is the school my children go to, which isn't in your district, by the way, so it's no commentary on your leadership. Even if they took the devices to school, they couldn't be connected, because the policies aren't in place, or the practices aren't in place, or the technology's not in place. And even if they took, I'm like you, I probably have, 12 devices laying around the house that are obsolete because my kids want the newest and fastest. Even if they took those in the sharing economy and shared them with their friends or donated to the school, if you don't have that vision that you have, Ann, it only solves a piece of the problem. You really have to have that holistic view of it. So back to the audience. Gentleman in the green
lanyard. Hi, my name is Manuelito. I'm a research associate at the John W. Gardner Center at Stanford University. So my question to the panel is, I think the research on the digital divide the critique of it is that it narrowly focuses on the distribution of resources between the haves and the have-nots. And I think there's a lot of conversation that's not being had about addressing the inequities in people's online skills and their ability to retrieve information and do research and fill out complicated forms like the FAFSA, for example. So I'm just wondering the extent to which San Mateo County is addressing this sort of gap in people's competencies and skills in being able to use the internet in effective ways.
What's the field that one?
I can answer that. Libraries are offering a lot of programs, and that's, we see both components. I think I mentioned that we see the people that don't have equipment or access at home, but then we see the people that don't have the technological skills. And so we spend a lot of resources on programs and classes. We see a large population of seniors that come in and need assistance, and then also the economically disadvantaged. Those are kind of the two big groups. But we also get parents that come in and ask for help, accessing the school loop. They need help communicating with teachers and accessing their kids' records and grades, and so we assist with that. We do provide basic computer classes in English, obviously, and then also in Spanish and Chinese. We do one-on-one coaching. And then we have a whole host of classes on things like Instagram and Facebook and emailing. And we do see every day people that come in and they are not proficient on even simple skills like using a mouse or filling out an application, downloading and printing. So all of staff are trained on that. That is a big resource area for us. We put a lot of resources in that, and we have computer classes at all locations. So it is something that we are working to address.
Thanks, Anne Marie. We're almost out of time. I just had one commentary on the digital divide that I think is interesting, because if any of my staff know me, I'm a bit of a data geek. So I hear numbers quoted to me all the time about, well, there's 60% accessibility to the internet, 75%. I hear these global numbers, but I was digging into the data because I always find that the devil's in the details behind the data. And this is no criticism of the telecommunications firms, because I know they build expensive infrastructure and they need to recoup their costs. But the example I saw posted on one consumer website was, the reason we don't do unlimited data plans anymore, which would be unfettered access, right? Not just that you're connected, but you're connected in an unlimited way, which Wi-Fi enables you, but cellular data plans don't, is, well, the reason we limit it to 2 gigs is the basic plan is because 2 gigs is 50,000 emails. And who needs more than that? A single YouTube HD video is 800 megs. So basically what you're saying is you're limiting those people to 2 hours of YouTube a month on their data plan. And if you talk to my kids, 2 hours a month of HD video just isn't going to cut it. And so, I appreciate, that we give some accessibility, but when we say there's a digital divide, it's more than just can you connect at a limited bandwidth. But if we're really turning these into learning centers and educational centers, it's got to be unlimited media rich, because it's not just about email anymore and getting 50,000 Gmail messages. It's really about connecting full video, HD, and sound. So we have 1 minute left. Brian, you didn't get to talk much today. Wrap it up for us. What are your closing thoughts you want to share with the group? In 1 minute, what did you take from all this?
Well, I think what I heard is that, we continue to have challenges in terms of both providing access and providing devices. And at the same time, we also have opportunities for those folks that are connected. And I think that's probably both the mystery and the challenge of this is how do we simultaneously use what we have and all of the devices to get the word out to the communities. And again, take a look at the online guide and the things that John and the other agencies are doing, and at the same time, work with the schools and the library on the challenges. It's interesting times and remains exciting.
Thank you all very much. I think we're out of time. I appreciate your attention.